Welcome everyone, Monica here with another installment of my Tarot Tonic series. So this is a series where I tackle something that's dear to my heart or that I consider really important, and I talk about it while featuring a deck that I choose specifically for that topic or that calls to me. And the reason it's called Tarot Tonic is because I've got my gin and tonic ready to go. I don't do these very often, maybe once or twice a year, always in the summer months when it's so hot. Here I live in the tropics, for those of you who don't know, and right now the temperature feels like 1,000,000 degrees. So a gin and tonic. Tonight we have Roku with a lime and yuzu soda, if anybody cares. So for the topic for tonight, I'm going to look at apocalypse in the age of Aquarius, which can seem like quite a heavy topic. However, it's not at all. In fact, it's a very inspiring and hopeful topic. And while I talk about it, I'm going to feature a stunning deck, the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Palin, aptly subtitled Finding Magic in the Midst of Life. So, before I get started, cheers. Oh, that's just so good. Oh, it might be a bit stronger than what I anticipated. This should be interesting. So what I like to do is I like to shuffle the cards first, because I don't know, I just like an organic fluid revealing of the deck as I talk. And often I just love to see how this deck shows up side by side with the things that I'm talking about. So the original meaning of the word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which translates as revelation. A revelation or an unveiling or uncovering. And I dare to say that, judging by the turmoil present in the world, both at a global scale, but also seeing it at a personal scale via people that I know who are either really struggling or have absolutely lost the ability to think critically and instead give themselves to extremes or take whatever the algorithm feeds their inner fears as validation for their worldview. I would say that a great unveiling is indeed taking place. And those who are entrenched in their belief or pursue archaic dogmatic ideology are inflexible and brittle to change. Those people are struggling the most. Talk about struggling. This Nine of Swords is just so apt. Doesn't want to deal with the unveiling to really see. So those people are struggling the most and may well find the coming years very, very difficult. It doesn't have to be this way, of course. And one way to not find yourself in such circumstances would be to ensure you don't get caught up in either one of the extreme sides of any view or argument. After all, I believe it was the ancient sage Lao Tzu who said, the wise person walks the middle path. And it's not just philosophers who have deducted this much. Look at a natural phenomenon, such as a cyclone, for example, and see how the center is completely calm, while chaos surrounds it all around. And the greatest disturbance is on the edges, the periphery, the extremes. When I talk about extremes, I mean, these days you can find a video online from someone proclaiming that, for example, eating meat and only meat is the best thing for your health. While at the same time you can find a video from someone else proclaiming that eating fruit and only fruit is the best thing for your health. And both these people talk with a certainty of conviction, utterly convinced that their view is the one that is absolutely correct. But let's go back to Apocalypse, aka the Great Unveiling. What might be getting unveiled, and why is it so upsetting to so many people? Oh, this is fantastic, Jen. I think I need to take a step back before I answer this and ask you to think of an instance in your life when you were certain of something as being the truth, and then had that certainty shattered by the actual truth, which was rather different to your own thought of what the truth was in that matter. In other words, a time when you wrongly believed something was true and were very certain of it, and then had to face the painful reality that it wasn't. Harsh, wasn't it? Deeply painful, or perhaps very humiliating, or perhaps illuminating and freeing. I think that on one level people cling to their version of or perception of truth because perhaps they have invested themselves for whatever reason in that perceived truth. Or perhaps to admit otherwise would be a blow to their ego, and the more that you have put your trust and belief into something, the harder it is to admit that you might be wrong. It would also shatter the way they have ordered their world. You know, the way people order their world so neatly and carefully. And the people they've chosen to associate with, the networks they're part of, the structure that holds their life together would absolutely crumble. And that indeed is a very frightening thought. So in a sense, it is a sense of self-preservation that keeps someone clinging to an ideology and refusing to even consider that it is not what they think it is. Of course, if one aligned with the energy of the Source, or the Great Spirit, or whatever name you wish to give it, if one truly was touched by this energy and felt it right to the marrow of their bones and the pulse of their heartbeat, they would know that there is no need to fear, for the grace and the love of the Great Spirit is available to us always, should we be open to it, and it will guide us through any challenges in life. We're always given what we need when we need it. Not necessarily what we want, but certainly what we need. And so I think that maybe answers the part of why this great unveiling might be so upsetting, when in fact it's just bringing forth the truth. And doesn't the saying go, and the truth shall set you free, no matter how painful it is? Which ironically enough is actually a quote from the Bible after all, though it's a universal lesson and not one that is owned by the Bible or any other book. I personally think that collectively we are at that time when certain things that either we have been told are truth or that we decided were truth are being shown to be false. And by the way, if you think this belongs solely to one side, let me reassure you, it doesn't. And I categorically do not mean it that way. As in, I don't just mean that politically, left versus right, but also across any system or belief or ideology. I think, and this is just my personal view, that there are three main areas where the veil is lifting for many people. And these areas intersect and share common ground. I will talk about each of these three areas one at a time. Starting first with our perception and relationship with the natural world, our Mother Earth. One doesn't need to be a hippie or renounce the Western world on a one-way ticket to Tibet to understand that the Western economic model of infinite growth on a finite planet is at best insanity and at worst, ultimately, self-destructive, I would say. And that poses a huge conundrum to anyone who has made a career out of producing and selling anything that supports the corporate neoliberal model, which is based on infinite growth on a finite planet. I'm not just talking here about the production of cheap goods, though that is, of course, the first thing that justifiably comes to mind. Anything from the development of suburban sprawl, so beloved by town planners, designed without consideration for sustainable transport or energy design, so utterly dependent on cheap petrol or any petrol really, or even electric cars who chew up rare minerals for components or what have you. Through to, let's say, just as an example, the gold jewelry that is sold in sterile shops, in shopping malls. Gold that is often mined or rather plundered from third world countries by corporations with impunity and reckless regard for the environment. To the selling of carbon credits and other so-called environmental schemes, all designed to keep the economic hamster wheel spinning. Basically, I would say the vast majority of middle and upper class jobs in the West contain either an element of prostitution of one's ethics and morals. Nicely, oh, the devil. This is why I love to shuffle. I just love to see how these things kind of synchronize with what I'm talking about. Yeah, so, the jobs that we have in the West are basically selling one's ethics and morals, very nicely covered and justified by cold logic. Or those jobs are promoted by parents and society as desirable, with no question ever of whether they are ethical jobs, when part of the answer, not the whole answer, but part of the answer to the whole issue is to just consume less of anything and find meaning through work that does not depend on the desecration of ecosystems or that serves to sustain the neoliberal economic and corporate model. Of course, consuming less would lead to very much a Tower moment. Perhaps like me, for many the veil lifted a long time ago, and their rejection of the economic and political system is now finally being acutely felt. I remember distinctly sitting in one of my lectures in engineering. Yes, I have an engineering degree, though I was never really an engineer. So I was sitting there in one of these lectures, and it was on just-in-time supply chain systems or something like that. And I was thinking, but is such a system sustainable really? And what happens when there are energy interruptions or supply chain interruptions? How sustainable is it to have products shipped in from the other side of the globe? And these kinds of questions went through my head, but the course, of course, was not interested in that. It was all about efficiency and how to mathematically create and solve models that maximized one output, usually profit, while minimizing inputs, usually costs, wages, and so on. Of course, I left that career path not long after I started it and never looked back, and drastically changed the way I shopped, what I bought, and so on. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but the person that I was 20 years ago is unrecognizable to me, and that is a great thing. Now, the second area where the truth is being unveiled, at least in my opinion, and cheers to that, and this is an important one, is power. At its core, it's about who do you see as powerful and who do you give your power to? Because if you're raised to see some outside being or entity or corporation or government, so someone outside of yourself, as the power, and you do not see that within yourself, or you are taught not to see that within yourself, but to give it to someone else in power. And I recognize this is often indoctrinated by our role models. Then you have people that lack the drive for empowerment. I mean, why would you have that drive since someone else will look after that issue or look after you or sort your problems out? This is, of course, a delicate issue because fundamentally, we do need to be part of a collective. Unless you're happy to go and live off in a cave by yourself. But trust me, it's not all that what it's cracked up to be. I think that the last decade or two have really shone a light on the fact that many of those we consider to be powerful or that we looked up to as leaders or that we aspire to emulate are in fact not just corrupt, but profoundly sick individuals. I would say even evil. How many monarchies are beset with stories of their members being accused and charged with heinous crimes against not just other people, but innocent children? How many politicians have been uncovered to be corrupt to the core? How many CEOs have been shown to display narcissistic traits at best and sociopathic ones at worst? How many of us in our younger years were told that to be rich and famous, like so-and-so, is, an ideal to attain? Whether we were told that explicitly or whether it was fed through us subconsciously through pop culture, music videos, and so on. So I think in the age of Aquarius, I honestly think the age of Aquarius is absolutely ripe for people to take that power back, to realize, to know that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being humble, living a simple life, surrounding yourself with local community, and not being pretentious, not showing ostentatious displays of wealth, or even aspiring to that. Aquarius, remember, is about humanitarian values, about community, about society, but a society that is fair, equal, and progressive, not one where the richest 1%, regardless of their political leaning, rule over the rest of us. Now, the third area which I think ties the previous two, I think they share common ground, is a connection to and reverence for the spirit world and the magic contained within. Hear me out on this one, and cheers to all the magic we're surrounded by the way. I think this is the hardest part for many people to understand, let alone accept. That what we see around us is not all that there is. That there are spirits, angels, plant spirits, elementals, and a whole spectrum of energetic beings out there. Not only is this acknowledged as fact by virtually every single indigenous culture on this planet, and I think we absolutely need to give credit here to every single indigenous culture, not only because they know this, but because prior to colonialization, they did not abuse the natural world around them anywhere near the extent that our Western corporate and political class has. In fact, they revered it and took steps to look after it. So not only that, but it has been researched, recorded, and practiced by many physicians from hundreds of years ago to today's pagan or witchcraft community. You only have to look at the number of titles published, not only by mainstream publishers, but also the emergence of independent publishing houses that specialize solely on niche occult topics, to understand that this aspect is no longer fringe, or at least nowhere near as taboo as it was once perceived. I think the opening of information long held as secret or occult, such as magical practices, witchcraft, and so on, have opened up Aladdin's cave, or perhaps Pandora's box, wide open for anyone to access and to practice. The problem is that many people who have not checked their egos and who have deep-seated unresolved issues masquerading as self-important wisdom are playing with the proverbial fire, without understanding, first, what they are really doing, and second, the repercussions, not just for them, but for those around them. You might rightfully ask, why might the word apocalypse be associated with the end of the world then? I would say because such an unveiling does indeed bring about the end of a world, i.e. the old world, the old systems. Since our real power as human beings is uncovered, and we realize that we no longer need an overarching authority to support us, and that we are part of a much greater whole than what we have been led to believe. Now, don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that there is no need to have healthy and functioning systems, such as social care, healthcare, and so on. What I'm saying is that so many people are brought up to look up to some type of authority and then unconsciously give that authority power. So have no fear. I certainly have no fear, for the apocalypse is not really some catastrophic disaster imposed upon us by a fearful, vengeful God. It's already here, actually, in the form of people taking control of their lives, no longer giving their energy to old paradigms that only serve only the rich and powerful. In the form of the lifting of the veil, revealing us to be part of a greater, holistic world that acknowledges spirit and the sacredness of nature, and ultimately gives meaning and abundance in ways that cannot be understood or replicated by the old paradigm. So I think that's all I've got to say on the matter. Cheers, everyone. If I remember, I will try and link the other tarot tonic videos that I did. There's only like 2 or 3, I think, from memory, in the description box below, if that's of interest for you. But I hope you enjoyed this little, not really a rant, it's been more of like my own personal insights and thoughts into what's going on. And I always thank you for being here. Thank you so much for supporting my channel, for watching my videos. And until my next video, take care.